So if you haven't guessed it just by looking at the haircut, I'm a retired military. Mitch and I were in the same civil engineer corps. Admiral Bono last night was my former boss at Defense Health Agency, and I hadn't seen her in about 6 years. And so I ran into her last night, and she came up to me, and without even saying hi or anything, she's like, "Gil, what's up with this?" Okay, you saw my picture. That's a picture from when I was active duty, clean cut, looked a lot more younger, but grew the beard over. It was my COVID challenge beard. I'm like, I'm going to keep it. Just imagine the savings in razor blades out there. So, it's here for a while. My wife's gotten used to it, so it's the new look. But Mike Wood apologizes for not being able to make it, and obviously he wasn't feeling well. He got results of a test that came back positive, so he just says, "Gil, you got it." But I will say that this presentation, we've been really focusing on making prefab and modular a part of our planning process, part of our design process. We are still stuck in the traditional construction mode, as I assume many of you are also in the same situation. So we're trying to take that step, move the cheese into making modular and pre-construction part of our everyday vernacular. It's an owner's perspective. Despite what Mike Wood would say, I am not an expert. I depend on a lot of smarter people in the room to really guide us, inform us, so that we can make the right decisions as the owner. I should have had that picture up when I was talking about my beard, but that was me. The only good headshot I've had, so I decided to just keep it for a while. But Mike Wood, many of you know him. He's been in the business for several decades, former surgeon who then switched over to the healthcare construction side of the house. So having that type of knowledge from both the clinical operations and facility construction, he's an amazing mentor to me, and he's involved in all these types of conferences, and he's, like I said, just missed for him not being able to provide his commentary. But then again, if there's any questions, I will bring them back to him so that he can respond. So I'm the National Director of Construction Programs for Medxcel. If you're not familiar with Medxcel, we're a subsidiary of Ascension Healthcare, which is one of the largest not-for-profit healthcare systems in the country. It's a Catholic-based system, and it's grown quite a bit over the years due to mergers and acquisitions. I think I've got a map here later to show you where we're at. These are the 5 pillars that we provide to Ascension Healthcare. So facilities management, planning, design, construction, my area, energy, and real estate. 99% of our work is with Ascension Healthcare. We do have commercial accounts with other non-Ascension facilities, mostly in the facilities management world. We're just breaking ground on a few efforts on the planning, design, and construction side. Some smaller projects, projects that are perfect for prefab and modular. Just more background, again, the size of the portfolio we have, or I should say the footprint we have, 160 hospitals, 2,600 sites of care. So that includes your ambulatory, non-ambulatory sites, MOBs. We've got a pretty healthy workforce, over 2,200 associates, over 60 million square feet of managed hospital space. So it's a growing monster that we have to figure out, what are the next greatest and the latest innovations in construction and facility management. So this is our national portfolio where we're located. So mostly the Midwest to the East Coast is where we are. I personally live out of Jacksonville, Florida. Our headquarters is in Indianapolis. Our growth markets are Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Chicago area, Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee are primarily where we have the largest amount of high capital projects. Okay, so the objectives, over the next 30 minutes or so is really, why does it matter to us as owners? How do we select the right partner? Mike likes to use 3 words: capability, capacity, maturity. So we'll talk about that. With all those projects, that huge footprint, we're trying to step away from looking at it project by project. We're looking at it as more of a programmatic approach to construction. And I'll talk more about that later. And then we'll talk about some of what we as owners see in terms of the impacts of going prefab and modular. So again, anytime you talk to Mike Wood about prefab modular, he'll bring up these three words, these three terms. Capability. It's really, if you're going to pick a partner that's going to help you achieve these prefab modular goals, do they have the capability? Okay, do they have that industry knowledge? What do their recent projects look like? Especially in the healthcare field, we want to see on that resume, a number of successful efforts in the healthcare area. So capability, capacity. This is something that's really killing us right now, is capacity. Do our partners have the ability to manage this, the labor, the production, and logistics challenges we've been experiencing for the past 2 years? They may have the capability, but if they don't have the capacity, they're very limited in their support for Medxcel and Ascension. And then maturity, again, their past experiences of their staff. Do they have established relationships, not only with supply chain, but with the local labor resources? We talked earlier this morning about making sure you have those connections with the local labor forces. As much as you want to bring in labor from outside of town, it's great to always utilize the folks that are in town. Okay, and the process. So these are the three legs of a stool. If they're weak in one, then that stool is most likely to fail. So this is what we, as owners, particularly Medxcel, always focus on when we start talking to people about can they be our prefab modular partner. So developing a strategy, and again, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, is program versus project. Okay, it's pretty easy if you've got 1 or 2 hospitals, and it's a large project, you can approach this as a project. But for Medxcel, we have a lot of smaller projects, ambulatory surgical centers, freestanding EDs, MOBs, that we can take a look at those as more of a program. Even when you have those larger projects mixed in, we have the ability, in fact, we just hired a full-time employee who does this as their job, is to look at those projects coming up 1 to 3 years from now and start identifying all the like parts. Because we ultimately want to come up with a kit of parts. That's what prefab modular essentially is. How many MEP systems, how many walls, how many head walls, how many ceilings, the list goes on, so that we can look at it as a program. This is how much we want to spend early on these projects for this year versus one-off projects that you do those buys here, here, here. The supply chain environment, this plays a huge role on deciding whether or not to take on a robust prefab modular strategy. How many here have to wait 9 to 12 months for long lead items? Okay, I mean, that's crazy nowadays. I mean, I used to think that 3 to 4 months was a long time. Now we've got to start planning for projects that aren't even going to start until next fiscal year at times. So you got to take a look at the supply chain environment. Going prefab and modular allows you to identify what you need to buy early. Portfolio level engagement with our partners. This is one where we want to create a long-term relationship. We don't want to fire and forget, let's do business with you on one project, and then we're going to move on. We really want to create that relationship with some partners, both on the design side, the GC side, and the vendor supplier side. And again, it's a difference between being transactional versus relational. So we want to make these relationships long-term, because it creates a much more efficient and faster acquisition process when it comes to our facilities. Contract structure, we're constantly looking at the ways our agreements are written. Looking at incentives for finishing early, incentives for coming under budget. And then really what's important in that strategy is the alignment of intent, design, and construction. That's got to happen early. You've got to be able to sit down with all the stakeholders, and I call this at 0% design. Sit down with all your stakeholders, both internal and external, say, this is our plan. Okay, as owners, we don't normally dictate means and methods, right? We just say, just build us a building. But lately with traditional methods, our buildings are coming in late, they're coming in more expensive. And so this is an area we feel we need to step in a little bit and be more intrusive, be a little bit disruptive, and make sure everybody at the start of the project knows we need to follow this type of strategy in order to get in our project on time and on budget. These are some of the owner considerations that I've collected in my 3 years with Medxcel. You know, if I surveyed the room, there's probably about 4 or 5 more slides we can easily fill up with more consideration. But these I believe are the most important, most critical to my experience. But cost. So when you're looking at prefab and modular, the cost of, say, wall systems, are they cheaper? Probably not, right? Probably a little more expensive. But if you look at a much larger portfolio, that cost probably goes down in unit pricing. But what happens is that related to schedule, the fact that you can reduce the schedule, compress it, shorten that critical path, that impacts costs. That's less general conditions you have to pay if you can get your general contractor off the site earlier. And schedule. Because you can compress that critical path, you can be doing activities in parallel that you couldn't do before. So if you're in New Orleans and you're pile driving down to 300 feet because you're below sea level, so you can have a nice stable foundation, you could be prefabbing at that same time, so that when it comes time to the correct sequencing, you've got all your parts and pieces, your kit of parts ready to go. And you don't have to wait to actually get in the facility to start building those pieces and parts. We talked about supply chain. Being able to identify those kit of parts early, purchasing those early is key in today's environment. Can't say enough about that right now, just with some of the timelines we've been seeing on some of our recent projects. It's like if we could have turned back time, we would have done this different. You know, because when we're expecting to open a facility here in a couple months and they come back and say, this piece isn't going to be here for another 6 months, it's devastating to be able to tell that to the owner. We don't want to tell that to the owner, to the end users, the hospital leadership, but that's today's market. And it seems like we're doing that more and more often, delivering bad news as the honest broker for the owner organization. Logistics. So I'll talk a little bit more about logistics later. It's going prefab modular isn't as easy as it sounds. Oftentimes, with prefab, you've got an off-site facility where you're putting all the parts and pieces together. First of all, you got to have that off-site facility. Hopefully, if you're lucky, your manufacturing partner has a site ready. Or in our case, we had to lease a warehouse a few miles off-site to be able to prefab it and then ship it to the site, which is another adventure in itself. Even though it's only 2 or 3 miles, you'd be surprised at how much damage could potentially happen to those prefab parts and pieces before it gets to the site. So really on logistics, that's something that has to be planned out as part of this process. Safety. Having that off-site for prefab increases the level of safety because you really don't have people walking all over each other on the job site. They're in a controlled warehouse space. In our example, they're in a controlled warehouse space. They are working on a skill, a trade, a craft over and over and over again. They don't have to worry about the weather. They don't have to worry about any other issues that are environmental because they are in a controlled, safe workspace. That also contributes to quality. And, they say the magic number is 3 for quality. As soon as you get 3 prototypes done, you should pretty much be able to repeat that over and over again with a high degree of accuracy. So quality is something that we've seen improve. So I walked a job site in Jacksonville, it was last week, and it's at 80% complete. It was traditional, because this was before we really opened our eyes to prefab and modular. And 55 head walls, ICUs, patient rooms. And of those 55, I counted 35 had defects in the head walls that were installed. These were already installed because they built them on site. And apparently the guy who was cutting the openings for the electrical plates thought he had larger electrical plates than we actually had. So there were overcuts in 35 of 55 head walls. You know, for the staff and the patients probably aren't going to notice that, but for somebody who's as OCD as I am, it's the first thing I saw. I mean, you could slip a dime through these overcuts. Okay, and it's the wood paneling type head wall. You know, you all know what I'm talking about. You can't just patch it, paint it. And then if you looked at one head wall and then you look at another head wall in another room, the outlets were in different locations on the wall. So that drives me crazy when I see that. So in a controlled space, in a manufacturing type of environment, you can catch that after the first or second or third attempt. So that's less waste. So now we got to go in a situation where you're at 85% complete to fix some of those quality issues. Because that's not a product I want tied to my name when I look at that wall. Productivity, standardization, and consistency, that all goes with creating an environment that is reliable and repeatable. And that's what prefab and modular help you do. So some of our experiences, we had a couple of jobs. Again, we are just really getting our toes wet in terms of the prefab and modular. So we've just got a few jobs that we wanted to highlight. This was a primary care clinic in Kansas. And where's Chris Burke and Dirt? They were our partners in getting this done. This is pretty much, I think 80% of the interior walls were dirt. And overall, in terms of the entire building, in terms of material, 12.5% overall, but 80% of what we had inside the wall systems were modular. When we did the initial budget concept, it was supposed to be 20% higher than traditional. But when we finished the project, when you look back, we ended up finishing well under our approved budget, at 4%. So, and a lot of that was due because we were able to compress the time and save money on reduced delays because of quality issues. We were able to move the contractor off site, so there was less general conditions we had to pay. But project cost savings, on these projects, $109,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but it truly means a lot to the customer because now there are other parts of that project with that scope that you can apply $109,000 to. Some of the considerations during this Kansas primary care clinic that we looked at, it was a learning curve for us, okay? And that's why we went with an established partner like Dirt. Okay, remember, capability, capacity, maturity. They've been in the business for a long time. And we depend on the expertise to really help us navigate how to do the interior build out of a clinic. We learned a lot of lessons. There's a lot of coordination with various trades and sequencing. So that's why that sequencing is key to getting your internal and external stakeholders at 0% design development or 15% to let them know this is the plan. This is how these pieces are going to be assembled. This is when they're going to be, these are the elements of construction that need to be completed prior to. This is what's going to happen when we bring the pieces in. This is what's going to happen afterwards. So it is like an orchestra when it comes to bringing modular pieces into the construction mix. Flexibility. There's a difference between modular and reconfiguration. We had to educate the end user that just because it's modular doesn't mean you can just take it down every week and figure out, you want to turn this nurse station or this exam room into something else. A lot of that modular has to go with the way it's brought in on site. You can reconfigure where you have electrical and so forth, but for the most part, we had to let the customer know that you can't just take these walls down on a regular basis and turn it into something else. Aesthetics and acoustics. I got some pictures, and the product, it came out really nice. Looked really good. I don't think some people to the naked eye that aren't familiar with healthcare construction could tell that this is a modular product. Obviously acoustics in a primary care facility, that was, it's always a concern for patient privacy and so forth. Durability and maintenance have proved to be very durable. If anything happens, some cart goes crashing into a drywall, and that's, facility management needs to be called up to do some repairs. But for these wall systems that we're using, it's fairly easy to replace or fairly easy to clean. So these are some of the pictures of the systems that we use in the Kansas project. Also mentioned that we use furniture as well, casework. But overall, very clean look. Great reviews from the end users. And again, this was our first experience in the modular environment that kind of gave us the sense that we needed to look at other parts of the facilities that we can go modular and prefab. So we went a little bit bigger the next time around. This is in Nashville. So it's an OR Tower expansion project. So with this one, again, now we're in a major acute facility that is operating. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to minimize the amount of disruption as possible. In fact, the office of the CEO was they can literally overlook the project site. So you really wanted to minimize the amount of traffic, the amount of work you could if you could bring it outside. And so that's what we did with Nashville. Our real estate team was able to find a warehouse about 2 to 3 miles off campus, and they were able to work with our general contractor to basically create a multi-purpose prefab site. So right now, I think that 5% is a little bit low, but they came back and said about 5% of the materials they used were of prefab modular nature. We basically focused on the operating room ceilings, MEP racks for the surgery suite corridor distribution system, head walls. Design and construction, we found that we've been able to reduce the schedule by 2 months by having parallel activities going on at the same time. And that came out to an expected savings of about $650,000. Not bad, right? Not bad. So feedback from the local team on this project was they had to align the strategy from the start. Again, starting at that 0%. If you're coming in and saying, hey, let's do prefab and modular at 60%, it's a little bit of a challenge. There's going to be some rework that's required in the design. And if you're coming in during the design construction portion, it's extremely hard. You're going to find some delays and a lot of rework to be done. So coming in at 0 to 15% is probably the right time to align everybody on going prefab and modular. So definitely a lot of coordination, a lot of sequencing on a project of this size, and a lot of modeling. And so there's a video, hopefully it'll pop up after some of the pictures that show some of that modeling effort on how things are prefabbed, where they go, what the sequencing is, and then we've got some videos of the actual warehouse at work that you can see. Again, that prefab warehouse, we had to lease it. The cost of the lease, the benefits, the cost analysis in terms of the expected savings far outweighed the cost of the lease. And then you throw on the fact that you can start generating revenue 2 months early, 2 months earlier than our hospital leadership had planned. This was a no-brainer to go this route. Sustainability, less material waste, because you can identify those quality issues right up front and be able to mitigate the amount of wasted material versus if it was on site. And again, one of the challenges they identified was logistics from the warehouse to the project site. And again, job site safety was improved because we had less people within the hospital trying to work around each other. The proper sequencing made sure that we had just the right amount of people to do the jobs they had to do inside the hospital, and then they were out. And then job site efficiencies. These are some of the pictures that you see. The one to the far left, those are prefab head walls, also in the middle. The one to the right is our ductwork, as well as the MEP racks. And then the one on the lower lower right is the ceilings that we prefabbed. And in the hospital in Jacksonville, again, non-prefab, lots of quality issues with the OR ceilings. So lots of rework that we're working, unfortunately. And then can we play the video? There we go. It's a quick 3-minute video. Real-time speed. These guys move fast. If you didn't guess, our general contractor was Turner. But I love watching that video. I mean, did you notice how clean the warehouse was and the job site was? They didn't do that just for the video. That's what it looked like the entire time. A really clean job site, clean warehouse, working space. People aren't walking all over each other. I mean, it was truly an impressive effort, great plan. Mitch, I think he's out of the room, but I'm going to constantly use his term. You plan the work, you work the plan. Turner hit it out of the ballpark on this one. They really planned the work. Working with our architect on this one, which was Gresham Smith, to really execute those portions that we decided were going to be prefab and modular. Let me see. So prior to really diving into prefab and modular, we did ideation sessions with a lot of folks from industry. We invited folks from the architect, engineer world, from the general contractor world, other users, consultants, and we just kind of summarized some of the themes from these ideation sessions. And I highlighted some of the ones that I thought were pretty interesting. In terms of project delivery, we talked about, if you really want to be successful, create a relationship that could be potentially long-term with your partners versus something that is a one-shot, done deal. But yeah. So in terms of project delivery, finding the right partner was key for us. Prefab not being part of design, you can see in that last video that it was part of the design. I mean, they started from day one knowing that we are going to go prefab with this. We are going to design the components to be put together like a kit of parts. And you can see it was like a manufacturing warehouse process. You often, until recent years, you don't normally associate manufacturing a facility with healthcare. But that's basically what we're doing. We're manufacturing some of the guts of the facility for a healthcare facility. And really, one of the ones that I think we're really starting to change the culture, move the cheese on, is not the first thought of an owner, architect, engineer, or GC. We've changed that. This was from about a year and a half ago. It literally is, as soon as we have a requirement, we start brainstorming, okay, what parts of this facility, whether it be an MOB, or whether it be an acute clinic, or an ambulatory clinic or an acute facility, can we go the prefab modular route? And then having an owner and a hospital leadership that is really willing to say, if you have any of these crazy ideas, Medxcel, bring them to our region. We will incorporate those into our project. So that's what happened in Tennessee with their former CEO, who's now their chief strategy officer, who basically came to us and say, if you have anything that is innovative, we would love to be your test bed. And so we're looking at other facilities in the Tennessee market that we can expand upon this theme. Availability of prefab shop locally. So really that was some of the, when we did this ideation session, a lot of experiences people had where, the local labor force just wasn't educated, wasn't used to doing it this way. They're used to doing the traditional construction method. And so really getting out there and talking to some of the local resources, general contractors, subcontractors, and getting them on board early on so that they, this is another tool to add to their toolbox. And then getting those off-site prefab sites, whether it be contractor-owned, owner-leased, or even in finding enough laydown space within the project site was key for us. And the last, training the workforce to install components. A lot of people don't, when we talk about prefab education, we think about our trade partners, we think about the owners, think about the designers, but also your authorities having jurisdiction. Bring them in on the process as well, so that they are familiar with the methods, and so that when they see a product during surveys, inspections, they know exactly what went into it. So we invite our surveyors into our warehouse to take a look at what's being built. And again, trying to figure out what's the best workflow, bringing in some experts from the industry to help us figure out what's the best way to manufacture, most efficient way to manufacture various parts of the hospital. So some final thoughts. 0% design. That's when you should start talking about prefab and modularity. Finding the right partner. Capability, capacity, maturity. Start small, just like we did. We did a small clinic with just really one major trade, interior walls. Now we're expanding to larger facilities, more items. Ask, listen, learn, adjust, repeat. Because there's people I know in the room that have gone even further steps than Medxcel Ascension has, that I would love to learn and listen to your experiences, whether they be successes or failures. We all learn from all these experiences. And how do you measure success? Whether it be, is it a financial measurement? Is it schedule? Is it quality? So we're still trying to redefine those. And then ultimately, I think what we're doing in Medxcel, because we talk about it pretty much almost every project, create that muscle memory in that culture to be able to willingly accept that we're going to go prefab or modular, or it's totally okay saying, hey, that strategy isn't for this type of facility. It's not going to work. So, all right, questions. I know we've got about 6 minutes, 5 minutes.
Yeah, all right, there you go. Did you have to use high-skilled labor for this, or were you able to get?
No, that's a great question. Like the subcontractors that Turner used, they were just regular, labor workforce that would have been assembling those inside the hospital, but they had to be trained how to do it in a prefab warehouse. So, if you have any union issues in terms of, hey, you're going to be taking work away from us, I'm like, no, we're using the same labor force, same skills, except you're just assembling it over here and plugging it in over there. So, yeah, really didn't need to change the workforce. Just needed to educate on the means and methods.
Sounds like you've used both off-the-shelf construction products and proprietary systems. Would you comment about that or talk about pros and cons?
That's key because if we can get things that are off the shelf, really, we're willing to, as an owner, willing to accept anything that will get us to first patient day faster. If it's off the shelf, great. If it's something that has to be proprietary and customized, we'll take a look at what the schedule are. But you've got great systems out there. DIRT's got good handle of the supply chain. I don't mean to advertise DIRT. Chris is going to do that tomorrow. But again, based on our experiences, we're looking for folks that can help us get the first patient day. And if it's off the shelf, readily available, and we can get it to the job site, that's probably going to be our first choice.
Were those racks fully loaded with MEPs? All MEPs, or was it just the mechanical component?
It was primarily mechanical for that one. And that was just for the OR suite, air distribution.
Just an observation, I don't think you can overstate the goodwill that you get by using local contractors, teaching them
Yes.
how to prefab and use
Absolutely.
modular, because they'll use that and save a lot of money and get a lot of business that way.
Yeah, so and that was one of the reasons why we thought Tennessee was a perfect location, because that's Turner's, that's their backyard, and Turner puts on a lot of these professional development training, and so now they've added this into their toolbox of how they can help develop the local workforce.
Questions? Any other questions? No?
Yeah.
What rate of damage did you have in that transport? Did you have an option to do it closer to site or on site?
We wish we could have done it off closer to site. The rate really wasn't that bad because you had your QA before it left the warehouse, QA afterwards, and really I would say maybe of those rack systems, there was only maybe one or two literally that had to be sent back for some rework.
Okay, so then,
And they were able to do it on site, that rework.
taking that, you were 3 miles off site, could you have done it in El Paso?
Yeah, I don't see why not, as long as you have the controls, the ability to safely transport those sites. I mean, having a warehouse 3 miles out it fell into our lap. It literally, real estate came jumping into the room and say, hey, we found some place that was perfect. But, if El Paso to Tennessee, if that was the only way to do it, that's a lot of increased coordination, scheduling, and so forth. But yeah, it can be done. Yeah. So I know some of the partners out there only have, X number of warehouses, distribution centers in key parts of the country. So there's going to have to be long haul for a lot of cases.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to program. If you have 12 buildings across the country that you're doing, centralizing that production activity in
Yeah.
one location is to the benefit of
It is.
organizational scale.
It is, and if you want to do something like that and centralize, the tertiary impacts obviously are do you have your own long haul capability? Do you have to contract that out? So there's other considerations that need to be pulled in to make that the perfect situation. So.
Thank you so
All right.
much, Gil.
Thank you
Really
very much.
appreciate it.
Okay.
And he'll be around. You can pick his brain some more if you want.